Hey guys, this is Kevin and Don. Welcome to Motor Racing Podcast. Don, how you doing today, buddy?
What's up? Ready to talk about Darlington, man? Let's get after it.
I hear you. Um, so before we get to Darlington, something about Darlington. So I was doing some research because I know the last episode we did, I think it was Friday. We were talking about Darlington being asphalt, driving like a concrete track. Well, I didn't realize this until I started doing some research. Darlington was called the Lady in Black because back in the day, Darlington was the very first track to be paved in black asphalt.
Oh, okay.
So that's where the name Lady in Black came from. But in the black asphalt, the reason why it's so abrasive is because it's got crunched up, ground up seashells mixed in with the asphalt.
Right.
So that's where the abrasiveness comes from on the track.
And that's another thing that we haven't really elaborated on much is how unique every single track actually is with these series that we enjoy talking about. It could be anything from the texture of the pavement to the how wide the actual track is that you have to race on. Like everything is so different. It's not just cars driving around a shape. Like there's so much to it. And bringing up the seashells that chew up the tires, that's such a cool thing to know and to hear about. Makes me want to have a little segment on fun facts. We'll do like a fun facts segment where we find out little tidbits of the track we're going to in the upcoming race weekend.
Maybe do that on Friday nights for our Race Hub edition. We're
Right.
doing our predictions and whatnot. Be like, oh, fun facts. This racetrack, yada yada yada.
By the
That
way,
might be kind of cool to start doing. Um, but yeah, other than that, man. So the Xfinity Series, I know we covered truck last night. Xfinity Series, still, man, what a race. Um,
Allgaier dominated that race, but it was still a chess match that these drivers had to figure out. And that's what I love about these races is even though it looks like a guy is dominating, they're still running a game plan that entire race up until the last turn, making sure they've got everything set in place.
oh yeah, for sure. And like Junior Motorsports, man, no matter where you go, it doesn't matter what kind of track, what they're driving. Could be Bristol, could be Talladega, could be Darlington, could be a cookie cutter, mile and a half, mile, short track, whatever. You always expect Junior Motorsports to be up towards the front, either winning this race or competing for the win.
Absolutely.
Um, and I know JRM as of this weekend got two in the top 10, and then we had another one in the top 15, and unfortunately, Sammy Smith finished 32nd. And I know that Carson Kvapil, he didn't get the run that I know that he wanted, which
Especially
was
after running so well at Dover, he put that 88 car in position to win that week. That was getting interesting in a hurry.
if Junior Motorsports doesn't put him in one of their cars next year, I don't know what the hell are they doing,
Right.
because yeah, Carson has shown. Granted, he didn't get the run the results that didn't finish, but throughout the race he was gaining, making way, making a name for himself in a Junior Motorsports car.
Right.
And Junior's another one of these guys that aren't just going to allow anybody and everybody to just jump in a Junior Motorsports car because there's that reputation that you have to uphold.
Right.
Um, but congratulations to Little Gator, Justin Allgaier, on their win at Darlington. I hate, and it's kind of funny because I think by this time last year, Justin already had 2 wins in the Xfinity Series.
Right. And he also had a handful of DNFs too.
Yeah, he did. And I know this year it's not really shown the results as far as what they wanted. And we know that Justin's had speed. He could have won Dover a couple weeks ago on the gamble, but the running out of fuel right there on coming to the last green flag start. But you had so many people with so many issues because you had people, spotters and crew chiefs coming out of the radio. Hey, weather in the area. This race is not going to go all the way. So we saw the pit strategy and all that stuff come into play, and ultimately Ryan Truex getting another win at Dover.
Back to back at Dover.
And I will say, if somebody doesn't put Ryan in a car, I don't know what they're doing either.
Right.
Ryan, granted, the only 2 career series wins that he's got came at Dover in the same car.
Hey, that's 2 more than a whole lot more drivers that have been on an Xfinity team.
Yeah. I mean, a win's a win.
Right.
And granted, he's only part-time right now. But the fact that a part-timer has 2 wins with the same organization and the same car at the same racetrack. So let's say, let's get this kid behind the wheel. Let's sign him a full-time deal, because if he can get the backing of Joe Gibbs Racing at some of these other tracks, imagine Martin retires here in about a year or so. If they sign Ryan full-time,
right
and
into the 19 car.
Yeah, and Truex comes to replace Truex.
How interesting. I don't think that's ever happened in NASCAR history before.
Nope. And we haven't had very many brothers racing, because you've had Jeff and Ward Burton.
Right.
You've had Kyle and Kurt Busch.
Right.
And now you've got Ryan Truex and Martin Truex Jr.
Those are the only brothers all the way across the board?
The only ones, honestly, that I can think of right at this point.
What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, buddy.
What's up, Jordan?
Same old, same old. What y'all talking about?
We're actually going over Xfinity.
Going over what?
Well, dinner. Talking about dinner and Xfinity racing.
Okay, that's fair.
So I know we mentioned Ford finally gets their first win of the season in Cup. I know that Ford is still searching for that first win in the truck series and in the Xfinity series. Ford has shown plenty of speed across all 3 series all year long. So maybe Ford is just that much closer, with Brad Kay getting that win, Ben Rhodes and Ty Majeski getting those top 5s this weekend. Cole Custer, of course, finishing 3rd. He's been so close to a first win this year. Riley hasn't gotten a win yet this year, I don't believe.
Riley, no, he's got last year, I think.
I feel like that time is coming.
Right.
For Stuart Haas, whether it's Cole. And honestly, at this point, in my honest opinion, I feel like Riley Herbst is going to rattle off a win before Cole Custer does.
Probably. And Cole was in position last week too. There was no way he was catching Allgaier. And I think he finished 3rd. I think Cole did.
Yeah, Cole finished 3rd. Ford actually finished 3rd across all 3 series this weekend.
Wow.
But we do have to shout out Parker Kligerman in that team. For the runs, not just last year, but the team that they've built and the money and the speed that they've brought to the racetrack all season long. Parker has shown that he can get behind the wheel of one of these cars and he can run with the best of them.
Right.
We yet to win a race, but I feel like Parker's probably about this close. I'll say by the end of the season, Parker will probably rattle off 1 or 2 wins. You got the background noise, Jordan. We got Anthony Alfredo in that 5 car, actually doing something. The top 15 finish this week. Awesome job by the Pasta man. There's so many things that can be said about him that are just absolutely awesome. As far as he's come from running a part-time cup ride to the part-time Xfinity ride to full-time, and now to actually being able to compete up front. Now, with that being said, we've got somebody else, Chandler Smith, who we always seem to see up front. Really hasn't. He's been quiet the last couple races.
Right. He rattled off 1 or 2 wins early, maybe just 1, but he rattled off an early win, and then we really hadn't seen much of him.
Yeah.
Hang on 1 second, Kevin. Jordan, we've got a lot of background noise from you, bud. Go ahead, Kevin.
With Chandler Smith being over at Joe Gibbs Racing and into Toyota in decent equipment for the last couple of races, we haven't heard anything about Chandler Smith. He's been quiet, not really finished in the top 10. He had a 12th place finish this past weekend.
Right.
So top 15, a good, decent point stay for them. Now the Xfinity Series, we don't have Xfinity racing this week, do we?
No Xfinity and Trucks and Cup at Wilkesboro, I believe.
So it really
So
wouldn't be. Go ahead, Jordan.
I peeped into Indy 500 practice. It is currently under a weather delay.
Figured.
Story of my life.
Story of my life. Okay, let me stop.
Man, Xfinity Series has been. It feels like Xfinity Series has been the race to watch these last couple weeks. Granted, we've had those awesome finishes, great racing in the Cup Series, but it seems like the Xfinity Series has kept us on our toes, right there on the edge of our seats, because it always seems like somebody tends to run away with it. And then right there towards the end, when everybody's getting aggressive, everybody's starting to run a little harder, and things start to change, and it doesn't play out the way that we think it's going to play out.
Right.
Hey, Jordan, buddy, you might need to hit mute on your mic. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Xfinity. So Junior Motorsports, with the win there, the domination this season by Chevrolet. I know Toyota's rattled off a couple wins, but Chevrolet has been there to say, okay, we're not just running around here. We're here. We're here to compete, and it's always and Toyota's having to look over their shoulder because Junior Motorsports here recently has been the only team to give anybody a run for their money.
Right.
And I hate to say that because Colleague in the past in Xfinity Series, where has AJ Allmendinger been this season?
Well, look, AJ always starts sticking his nose in when them road courses start showing up. So really pay attention to when the road course part of the season shows up.
And we got Sonoma coming up here in a couple weeks.
Right. People tend to forget that we're only in week 13 and we've only had one road course that was COTA back in March. So we're fully 2 months removed from that. So I fully expect AJ to start poking his nose in towards the top here coming up soon, and definitely at the road courses.
And not just AJ, but Colleague Racing as a whole.
Right.
They've seemed from last season and these last couple seasons to be in one of the big teams that everybody's talking about. Everybody's like, we got to go out there and beat Colleague Racing this week. We got to go out there and beat Colleague Racing this week. And now it's on the flip side. Colleague Racing says, okay, we have to go out and beat Junior Motorsports this week. We have to go out and beat JRM. Maybe there's from the end of last season all the way up until now, week 13, there's been a lot of things to change with the Xfinity Series. And a lot of things just to change with the sport in general. So does that throw a wrench in there for Colleague Racing, and not just Colleague, but I mean completely for everybody?
Absolutely. And to elaborate on what you were saying with teams kind of leapfrogging Colleague when Colleague was kind of like the cream of the crop there for a little bit. Isn't that great though, that teams are catching up to each other? They're like, okay, well, Colleague's doing this. So in the off season, they're like, all right, we got our notes. And now those teams are a couple steps ahead of Colleague. Now we get to see if Colleague has the correct response to keep up with what the teams are coming with.
Well, and see, the other thing with that is Colleague and RCR are on the same campus. They're pretty much, right there together.
Basically out of the same shop.
Colleague is all their motors are coming from RCR.
Right.
So why Xfinity? Why is Austin Hill and Jesse Love out here rattling off top 5s, top 10s, and wins, and Colleague has just absolutely done not jack shit?
Maybe they're more talented.
Well, and does that beg to differ? Does the term "run out of talent" apply here?
Maybe. It's not been bad enough to where drivers are running out of talent yet, but it's definitely on the alert. Like, okay, what's going on? Let's start. We're getting into the meat of the season now. We really need to start putting some solid finishes and start getting a couple wins, which they haven't done yet. So when we're talking about Colleague, but as far as running out of talent, I wouldn't go that far yet because that's a heavy term in the sports world where you're actually getting bashed on, right? So let's give Colleague the benefit of the doubt and see if they can do something with like I said, with the road courses coming up. And then once we get closer to the playoffs and we're not seeing Colleague's name up towards the top, then we'll start asking ourselves, all right, what's going on?
So what I think Sonoma is actually the last race on Fox's. So if say, granted, that's only a couple weeks, and I think that marks the halfway point in the season.
Correct.
If it's to say that the week after Sonoma, when NBC takes over, if we haven't seen Colleague up front or we're not mentioning Colleague at all, as far as in a good manner, is that where you start to ask questions? Is halfway through the season, or do you wait until you're 4 or 5 weeks out of the playoffs?
I think you wait until you get a little bit closer to the playoffs because we've talked about this with Ford and how they've struggled at the beginning parts of seasons, and then all of a sudden they get hot right before the playoffs, and then bam, they're rattling off wins, and then Joey Logano's your 22 champion. Boom, Ryan Blaney's your 23 champion. And now Ford's struggling again, with the exception of Brad Kay coming through with his win. And look, it's halfway through the season. Is Ford going to start turning some heads?
I'm going to call it now. Brad Kay wins the Cup championship.
That's a bold prediction.
Hey, you need to get on whatever sports betting website and go put yourself a $50 bill on that man, because I wouldn't refute it. Knowing Brad's confidence and now that he's got the win taken care of, ooh, boy, y'all better watch out, man. And then Chris Buescher racing. I'm sorry to interrupt both of y'all. Chris Buescher racing the way he is and the way he's lost the last 2 weeks. Oh man, RFK. Ooh,
he is a dog on fire at this point.
Right.
But so I just peeped into IndyCar practice. Kyle Larson's ending the day in 15th. The reason why he is down in the back, they discovered a problem early on in practice, so they just wanted to take it back and so they can figure out the problem. So come practice tomorrow, he'll be able to hit the top speeds that he was hitting earlier. I guess there was some type of electrical issue, and they wanted to make sure they had that taken care of first.
So what I had said was correct. I figured that there had to have been something wrong because Larson, with the little bit of practice that they had been getting in, he was showing tremendous speed. And I know there was no way, even if he backed off just a little bit, that he was dropping like that through the point, or not the points, through the field.
Yeah, it was an issue with the car. That's why he had dropped back and slowed down on his speeds. But other than that, his top speed was what's his top speed? His top speed was looks like 225 was his top speed.
Oh, that's sissy speed. Let's see 236.
That's slow.
And Scott McLaughlin. Well, they're not doing Indy 500 race day speeds due to the fact that they don't want to risk tearing up their cars and things like that. But Scott McLaughlin is the fastest with the top speed of 229. Will Power is second seat. There's that Team Penske at the top, 1 and 2, and Justin Newgarden is sitting in fourth. With Colton Herta, who I'm predicting to win, Colton Herta is sitting in third.
See, these guys got more balls than I do. I would gladly hop behind the wheel of a Cup car, but for me to be pedaled to the metal and just all balls to the wall in an Indy car, I'm just gonna put it out there. I ain't got the balls, bro.
Because at Indianapolis,
30 mile an hour.
Because at Indianapolis, you don't lift in an Indy car. You do not lift, because if you lift, you're going into the wall.
Listen, I would want to be in the seat, and I would want to be at 150, 160 in that range and see what that feels like, and then see how I felt moving forward. Okay, do I feel like I can handle more? I don't think I could just go in and be like, all right, let's go 220. I would want to kind of test the waters for a few laps and see how it feels.
Yeah, because I feel like it hitting 180, 190 right there. That would probably be the point where my anxiety and my nerves would start to make my hands and everything go numb.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be, okay, I'd probably have a Ricky Bobby moment.
I mean, that's fair. But and then 4-time champion Helio Castroneves is in 10th. He's attempting to be the first driver to win 5 in the Indianapolis 500s, and he is going to be he is with Meyershank Racing. And speaking of Meyershank Racing, I did speak to one of their members to the media team, and as if things play out, we will be guests of the number 60 at Mid Ohio.
Right on.
And that's of Felix Rosenquist.
Okay.
Right on.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Well, let's dive into Cup. Let's dive in deep. Brad K, first win for Ford of the season. But with the way that the racing, if Chris Buescher and Tyler Reddick don't wreck out, does Ford definitely get their first win of the season?
That's not a definitely.
Maybe.
It's definitely a maybe. The thing with Chris and Tyler is they're both of those cars were so damn strong, man. Like, and it didn't matter if one was behind the other. They were both running so well that it would have been a coin flip. We might have seen a Ricky Craven, Kurt Busch moment again. And I wouldn't have been surprised one bit if they came around side by side at that last lap. It's a definitely maybe for Ford and that win, because Brad's car didn't look like it started coming around until lap maybe 32 to 35.
I feel like he had a strong long run car.
Absolutely. Whereas Chris and Tyler's mid-run cars were super strong, and that's exactly where it fell to the end of that race.
Yeah, and right after the middle of the run, you start to notice Tyler, and even across the field, a lot of these guys like Larson. I just got done watching Radioactive for this weekend just a little bit ago. Larson, they were 35 laps into a run, and he's like, how much longer till we pit? I'm struggling.
Right.
And I know Reddick was coming across saying the same thing. What's the strategy? What are we doing here? I don't know if they used up if he used up all his stuff and expected it to last a little longer than what it did.
Well, listen to the two drivers you listed and their driving styles. So,
well, all the way up against the wall.
And then they're always hard drivers. I mean, they drive those cars hard. They get the most out of those cars out of every lap.
And then what you mentioned, Chris Buescher and Tyler Reddick racing incident, right?
Right.
I could see Chris Buescher's frustration with
Absolutely.
Tyler Reddick. But cahoots and big respect to Tyler saying, man, I fucked up. Me wrecking my own race car, that's on me wrecking you, but me wrecking you was never in the plan.
Right. He didn't go in there with the intention of hitting Chris or touching Chris. Tyler owned up to it. Look, I even read a headline from Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour that Harvick didn't appreciate or like Tyler's apology. And it was like, well, Kevin, that's not really your apology to give. Like, Tyler gave it the way he could in the heat of the moment. I think Kevin responded as an analyst now rather than a racer. And I think that's why the opinion kind of came off incorrect, because Tyler immediately took responsibility. He looked Chris in the eye. He settled him down. He got his full attention and then apologized. Like, not a lot of men do that in this sport, and Tyler did it,
And a lot of guys, they'll, like the whole Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin thing. Denny's like, it's just short track racing. Like,
right.
There's always an excuse. I wasn't in the wrong, but he was. And then vice versa. I wasn't in the wrong, but he was. And Tyler's like, bro, I'm sorry. I fucked. That's my bad.
Right.
And to me, I gained a lot of respect for that organization. And not that I didn't have a lot of respect for that organization already, but there's a lot more there, especially for Tyler Reddick. I remember in the Xfinity series, he still had a little bit of growing up to do. I know he still had his problems.
My bad, y'all.
All good. Tyler Reddick just wasn't before he come up to Cup. Tyler was one of those ones that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way as a fan.
Right.
But that's changed. The maturity that's come through him coming from RCR to 2311, and then the rattling off the wins that he is, and just the speed, the amount of speed that he shows every week in and week out, man.
That guy can fucking drive, bro. Let's call it what it is.
and I hate to say it now, to pose the question, so Bubba's not really shown the results, I guess, that he's wanted. They've had speed, but Michael Jordan even said himself, I sign the paychecks and we don't sign losers.
Right.
We're here to be winners. If Reddick is outperforming exponentially at this point, if he is outperforming Bubba Wallace, how much pressure does that put on Bubba?
It can, and that's not just 23XI and Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin's team. That's Hendrick's team. That we mentioned Alex Bowman struggling for Hendrick. So it's no different from any other organization to the next. If one teammate is doing better and another one's down here, it magnifies because there is such a discrepancy in the results. What I can say for Bubba,
that's true.
Right. And what I can say for Bubba is he, and this is in his favor, he's gotten caught up in a few things that were just so out of his control this season that hindered a lot of top 10, top 5 finishes. So I don't think there's as big of a panic button on Bubba and his
Do you feel like there's still enough time between now and the playoffs for him to not necessarily get his head out of his ass? Because like you said, it's not been the majority of his finishes have not been his fault. He's been caught up in somebody else's bullshit week in and week out.
Right.
Like I said, they've shown up to the racetrack with speed. Hell, they showed up to Darlington with some hella speed in qualifying and practice, and it just didn't show through the race. But
he did finish 7th.
Yeah, he did. It's a top 10, and I mean, a top 10's top 10. You got some points.
Right.
So, I mean, is there enough time between now and the playoffs to be able to clean that up and be up there with Reddick, hopefully putting 23XI into the championship 4?
It was.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I haven't seen that hamburger there all day.
So do you think with this whole Kyle Larson situation, do you think if Kevin Harvick refuses to do the All-Stars, do you think maybe Hendrick will put SVG in that 5 car to run the All-Star race for Kyle Larson?
I'm going to have to take the words out of Don's book because I know we talked about this in private, but Don had a point. I don't think they put SVG in that car. And the only reason is because he drives for Kaulig Racing. They don't want another team having all the data that they don't have to share to be shared with another driver of another team.
I'm gonna start yelling.
So I don't feel like,
especially when they have somebody capable of driving the car in Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, so Kevin Harvick, there's no bias and there's no favor there because he's not going back to Stuart Haas. He's not going back to another Cup team.
There might not even be a Stuart Haas come next year.
But that's still a competitor now. That's what the whole thing
True.
is.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, Stuart Haas, man, just because we're selling and we may not see SHR next season doesn't mean that they can't put somebody in that car and turn around, get that data, and put 2 or 3 of SH cars into the championship 4 in the playoffs from just the data they get from the All-Star race.
Right.
Because you got to think they're going to take those notes next year because we're not going to have the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. It'll be a points race, so they'll definitely want those notes. So, no, I don't feel like they put SVG in a car. I feel like if SVG races, it'll be with RCR or it'll be with Kaulig Racing or Trackhouse.
Now, rumor has it that according to Carson Hocevar, NASCAR is going back to Rockingham next year.
Yeah, he leaked that on
Question-
iRacing.
He said what?
He leaked that on iRacing that it's rumored that they're going back to Rockingham in 2025. Now, it's not surprising because there has been a lot of chatter amongst the NASCAR, shows and whatnot that Rockingham's name has come up. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made that announcement.
Yeah, and with that being
Carson,
said,
can he get in trouble for that?
possibly,
Trying to find 8 right now. You go.
but I don't think that's a good question. I mean,
it's freedom of speech.
but
It's going against the constitutional rights of everybody.
I mean that's true. But it's like this way: if that happens, is it a points-paying race? Is it the Clash or is it the All-Star race next year? That's the question.
No good. Yes.
The All-Star race, but we would have to do some research and see what kind of renovations they've started because that kind of thing does not take a short amount of time. And if they're going to host an all-star race in Virginia, it's Virginia, right?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. It's
Rockingham, North Carolina. I was thinking Richmond, my bad. But either way, out there in the middle of NASCAR country, that place is going to need 50,000 seats. You know, that's just what it is.
Well, see, there's the problem with North Wilkesboro too, is because they still haven't updated. North Wilkesboro is only sitting 10,000 people. So I feel like that's probably why they're. Jordan, you got a lot of feedback, buddy. I feel like the All-Star race, as much as I love seeing NASCAR back in North Wilkesboro, okay, and I'm not going to bitch at all, because as a fan getting into the sport as late as I did, I never would have thought in a million years that we would be racing back at North Wilkesboro, ever.
It's really
let alone
cool that they put that into motion.
Yeah, but the All-Star race at only 10,000 seats. I mean, what do you do? Now a points paying race, I could see 10,000. I think North Wilkesboro needs to update, and instead of having that one open end of the racetrack, they need to close it in like Bristol and utilize all that space to add grandstands.
Or at least do the turns, and then like they do with some tracks, your Atlantas, your Texas, add that hill back there behind the back straightaway, make it the main campers, because when they line up campers on that back fence, it looks freaking awesome.
Now,
they do the same thing at Martinsville, and it's
right.
Yeah, but do y'all think? What are your thoughts about Atlanta being moved from September to June for the second one?
Man, I feel like that's a bold move by NASCAR, and the only reason I say that is because of the weather, the temperature difference. Do you know how hot and how slick that racetrack is going to be in the middle of summer? Especially look at all the calamity we already have in Atlanta, right? With the repave. Now we're going to add in hotter track temps, which is going to be harder on the drivers because it's going to be hotter inside the car. These cars are going to be slipping and sliding like nuts. Now, if we're going to move this to the summer race, I feel like that summer race needs to be a night race. I mean,
that would make sense.
It would just be easier on the drivers. Granted, it's still going to be warm. It's still going to be hot, but it's not going to be excruciating hot. Yeah, it's going to be bearable, especially for the fans who have to sit out there in that damn heat. Now, as a race fan,
Texas, bro, it ain't fun, man.
No, and as a race fan, I will say, like I've told you, Don, I sat out in 24-degree weather at Bristol Motor Speedway to watch Kyle Busch win the Food City 500. So I will. Jordan, you got a lot of feedback, bud.
That's me. Sorry.
No, you're good. I'd sit in 105-degree weather as a race fan, because if I'm going to pay ticket, I'm going to sit out there. I'm not one of these guys that's like, let's go sit up in the suite. No, I want to be immersed in the race. One of my favorite things about the race, and I wish they made candles and stuff like this, but the hot rubber and the spent fuel and the exhaust fumes is one of the best smells in the entire world. I don't care. That's just one of my favorite smells. But I just feel like, that summer race, man, it's during the day. We have more wrecked race cars come checkered flag than we do if we say, okay, green flag drops at 6:30.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you got to think about the fans, because I know after COVID, a lot of racetracks weren't allowing coolers at all. And Texas was one of those. And I saw a lot of complaints when they started moving the All-Star race at Texas. Everybody was like, bro, it's 110, 115 outside, and we're not allowed to have fucking coolers in the grandstands. Right. There was a lot of people that first and second All-Star race, when they were talking about the attendance being a problem. I feel like the weather, 110% had to do with that.
Oh, absolutely. It's just so unbearable.
Because nobody wants to sit out there and sweat their sunscreen out and sweat their sunglasses off their face trying to enjoy a cup race, especially the All-Star.
Exactly. Now, that's like saying, because I've been to Indy, I've been there twice, and it gets hotter than hell in May. That's like telling fans of Indianapolis, oh, you can't bring any coolers, anything else like that. You just have to suffer when it's like damn near 90 degrees inside the racetrack.
Well, see, I went to before COVID, the last Coca-Cola 600 I went to was, I actually went to last year's, which kind of sucked because it was my wife's first and everything got rained out. So the whole Memorial Day thing they do with the helicopters and the pre-race stuff and all, it ruined it. But 2019, when Martin Truex Jr. won, I took my dad. We were in the infield, had pit passes and garage passes. In the infield, they were passing out free water bottles and had those big NFL fans the hoses hook up to.
Right.
The track in the infield, the track temp in the infield was 135 fucking degrees. We were standing out there in the middle of the infield for the pre-race concert, heat beating down. I had sunburn on my head, the back of my calves were burnt. My dad's lips, his face got so sunburned, it sunburned his lips, and they cracked and bled for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh damn.
Yeah,
I've
so
already
I mean,
decided- I've already
in
decided I'm
Nashville,
getting
it gets hot
sombrero.
as hell. But I mean, so I think the biggest thing we've got to talk about right now, and this is not me being biased, Kyle Busch contract with RCR is up at the end of the season.
Maybe he goes to Spire Motorsports. That's just me.
If he goes to Spire, I'm gonna quit watching. That's
I'm joking with you, man.
that's it.
I'm just joking with you, bro.
Did
What a
I like
strange
the
thing
move
that
to
would be.
RCR? Like from Joe Gibbs Racing in one of the top Michelin and motorsports, I felt like Richard Childress Racing was a big downgrade.
Mhm.
But when you don't have the option to go to Hendrick Motorsports when you're leaving Joe Gibbs Racing or Penske, what do? Signed a 2-year contract. He's rattled off 3 wins, bunch of top 10s, bunch of top 5s, made the playoffs.
Kept him relevant.
Yeah, but I mean, all these problems that we're having this past weekend, Kyle qualified 11th with some speed, and we had nothing but problems all day. We finished 27th with Austin finishing right behind us in 28th.
Hey, teammates.
No, Kyle, we talked about this last night. Cheddar's has already signed a 3-year extension deal with Kyle Busch, not Richard Childress
Not
Racing.
RCR.
Kyle Busch. And then was it Lenovo signed another deal. So he takes those sponsors with him. But does he leave RCR or does he see you, buddy? Does he leave RCR and take those sponsors with him to go somewhere better, or does Kyle stick it out to build a program like what Brad's doing? Because Brad, 110 winless streak, then he finally gets that win. So there was reason to have hope there, because Brad has shown speed week in, week out. It was not if, but when Brad got that next win.
Right.
But with Kyle Busch and all the problems with RCR, is it if or is it when?
Look, I think anybody's guess is as good as anyone else's, and it's going to boil down to a 50-50 flip, because I think only Kyle knows what Kyle wants, and I think Kyle is going to tell Kyle what to do at the end of the season, right? Like, he's not going to really discuss it with anybody other than his immediate circle, which is not going to include a lot of people. It's a great, man. I think if you were to ask me what I think Kyle Busch would do, I would think he would stick it out with his team. I don't think Kyle wants to team jump. I think he's getting to a point in his career where he enjoys stability and
needs to find a permanent home until retirement.
Right. I don't think he's trying to jump around. He would have to adjust everything in his life again to go to a different headquarters. Like,
I mean, but if we say, like we said, colleagues on the campus, colleagues, one of those teams that was talking to Kyle before the move to RCR. So Kyle really wouldn't have to uproot anything to move from RCR to colleague. Granted, there's new ownership, new crew chief, new teammates, new sponsors, new car.
See, I still think it would be like a starting over thing where he would probably more appreciate the stability that he has and leading up to the final years of his career. Switching crew chief, switching all that over again, even it being on the same area, still seems like it seems like a lot.
And Kyle, he just turned 39 about a week or two ago.
Right.
So Kyle's reaching that point where, I know we didn't see Dale Earnhardt. Sorry, Dale. We didn't see Dale retire and die until the age of 50. But Dale still felt young enough where he told them, like, I'm going to tell you when I'm done. It's not going to be the other way around.
Right.
And I know with Dale that he was actually a season out from retiring completely. I had seen that in an interview with RC.
Yes.
That him and Dale had sat down and talked. The season that he died was supposed to be his second to last season. The following season, the season of 2002 season was supposed to be Dale's final season, say goodbye, and retire.
Well, see,
Now,
and then that was also put into motion because with DEI already becoming as successful as it was so early, that was probably his mind was already on the other team, right? And so he was letting Richard know, hey, let's get this seat filled. I've got 2 years left, and that's what that sit down was between them two.
And the funny thing is that Harvick, I just watched the Happy Hour a couple days ago, and they were actually talking about this. Harvick was supposed to take over the 3 car for Dale after he retired. He had just signed a truck deal. I can't remember with who for 3 years. So the year that Dale retired, the following season, Kevin could take over the car. Well, Dale passed away, and Richard was like, okay, we need you in this car now. Well, so Kevin had to go buy himself out of his contract, a 3-year contract with the truck team. And He said from November all the way to the beginning of the season of that following season, they lived off of his wife's credit cards.
Wow.
And that affected him, but we couldn't tell that on the racetrack because the first race that Kevin Harvick jumped into that car did it for Dale.
Yep.
That amazing finish at Atlanta with Jeff Gordon.
Right.
And then of course the whole 3 salute and the tribute to Dale there. But do we see is Kyle reaching that point? I know Jimmy Johnson, no disrespect to old 7-time, but had his last win at Dover in 2017, retired in 2020. But between 2017 and 2020, didn't do a single damn thing. No wins, no nothing. Couple playoff berths that didn't last anywhere outside round of 16 or the round of 12. Have we seen the pinnacle? Have we seen Kyle Busch reach that climax? And now is it just starting to? He's out there just to run the car.
I think it would be accurate to assume that it's probably the downhill part of Kyle Busch's career, as much as none of us want to admit it, or even if you're not a fan of Kyle Busch and you can't wait for him to retire, you're still going to miss hating him once he's gone. Let's just call it what it is. And so I think it is. I think we're on the last kind of final stretch of what Kyle Busch is going to do. Whether or not he's able to rattle off another championship will be interesting to follow and see, because he's still got the capability of winning. It's just can he rattle together the right wins at the right time to do it, So do I think he can win another championship? Absolutely. In that 8 car, yes, I think he could win another championship. Do I think he's going to? Probably not. And I wouldn't be surprised if he retired before he said he was going to retire. Just his whole kind of demeanor seems like I don't want to say he seems like he's over it. He just seems like he's accomplished what he wanted to accomplish.
And the only thing that I know he said that he still just wants to set out to do, the only box left to check off is that Daytona 500.
Right.
We should have had it last year.
Right.
We were 100 yards from taking the white flag, and Trackhouse with Daniel Suarez cost us a 500 victory.
Right.
Now I'm not saying Daniel did that on purpose, but that's just ultimately what happened.
Right. You're racing for a Daytona 500 chance, so.
Yeah. And it kind of seemed, how big of a slap to the face would that have been to Joe Gibbs Kyle's first year with RCR to come back to win.
First race, bro. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if that would have even been a slap to Joe Gibbs. I feel like that'd have been a spit in the face.
It wouldn't have, in no disrespect to Coach, it would have been kind of like, I don't even know if it could go disrespectful as much as Kyle just kind of like, this is what you wanted type response, you know?
Yeah, you didn't want to fight for a little bit of sponsorship. You wanted the big dollars, big money. You let me go. This is what you get.
And yeah, I mean, oh my God, to a rival type team, you know, just because of how long they've been around.
And I know we ain't got much time left. I do want to hit this topic because I know we do have plenty of viewers, plenty of listeners. It just kind of got under my skin just a little bit as a fan. I feel like it's absolutely disgusting. But to look back at the Denny Hamlin Chase Elliott incident at the last year's Coca-Cola 600.
Okay.
Retaliation. I saw a post yesterday, actually, because I had written it down in my notes yesterday. Somebody had said, a Denny Hamlin fan had said something about Chase Elliott once again running out of talent, and that the retaliation that he showed Denny Hamlin was because he was nothing but a crybaby bitch who didn't get his way and got plowed into the wall because he can't drive anything. Said that he should have plowed the wall a little harder so he wasn't able to drive anymore. To me as a fan, that's disgusting.
Right.
Do I feel like Chase was in the wrong or the right retaliating with Denny? Do I feel like it was wrong? Yeah, because with these new cars, as hard as Denny hit that wall, I was sitting there right past the start-finish line, exiting the tri-oval there when Chase did that.
Right.
So the hard hit that Denny took, it was a hard hit. The suspension that Chase got, I feel like was deserved just because of the new car.
One race, and did he get fine points? I can't remember.
I can't remember the points, but I know he was suspended for the week after.
Right. He had a suspension for sure.
If we're in the Gen 6 car, Denny squeezes him up in the wall. He's been doing it 2 or 3 laps prior. The way he's racing Chase, squeezing him up in the wall. If I'm Chase Elliott, I'm pissed too.
Right.
You ran me. You squeezed me and you ran me straight up into the wall and used me as a backboard. So am I going to hook you in the right rear out of instinct because I'm pissed off? Hell yeah, I'm going to hook you in the right rear.
Right.
But with these new cars, as much as I don't like Hamlin and I would actually like to take up for Chase on this subject, I can't do that because Hamlin was right. And fuck, that's a hard pill to swallow. Hamlin was right.
And he tends to do that from time to time.
Yeah, he really does. And he does it well, but he also does it in the right way. Right. But I feel like Chase, I feel like it was split down the middle, to be completely honest. I feel like Chase was in the right just a little bit because I always talk to people about Chase not being his daddy.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying Chase needs to be Bill. I'm not saying he needs to drive like Bill, but I feel like Chase is way too nice behind the wheel of that Chevrolet.
Okay.
That he takes too much shit.
Okay.
And I feel like this was the point that Chase said, you know what? I'm not going to be run over anymore, and hook Denny in the right rear. Do I feel like that was the best decision to do at that point? Maybe he felt like that was the best way to handle that at that point, to get it across, to say, hey, I'm not here for you to walk all over.
Now, real quick before you keep going on that, I want to make sure people understand that as a racer, your first intention is to never right rear a driver towards the wall.
Ever.
I think Chase saw red for a moment, and that was the first option that he had available. I just want to make sure people understand there's no driver wants to right rear any driver. It in the moment it happens so fast, and that's the end result. Sometimes.
The only way that Chase felt like he could get his point across was to wreck Denny, and Denny just so happened to be on the Chase's inside.
Right.
Now, if it had been the other way around, he'd have squeezed him, and Chase would have able to then pull up alongside Denny on his left side and hook him into the infield and spin him out. that would have been a little bit. I don't feel like there would have been a suspension there, and I don't feel like now Denny still would have been pissed.
Right.
But rightfully not. I'm not going to even say rightfully so, because when you squeeze somebody like that up into the wall and you're racing them for so many laps, it comes back to the subject of respect in the garage. Nobody can show any respect in the garage anymore. I feel like that's why Kevin Harvick got out of the racing. I feel like that's why Truex is leaving. I feel like that's why Kyle Busch is probably on the end of retirement, besides of the issues that he's having now, is because these kids think it coming up through the ranks think it's okay to just wreck somebody out of nowhere.
Right.
And there's no respect in the garage. And NASCAR, the way that they police everything now, I remember when Jeff Gordon hooked Clint Boyer into the wall at Phoenix. Clint went AWOL. Clint ran over to his hauler, and there was words and fists thrown.
Right.
All-Star race a couple years ago when that incident between Ryan Newman and Clint Boyer, Clint got out of the car, went over to Ryan's window, and just started waylaying on him.
Right.
To me, I feel like at a certain point, NASCAR needs to police it, but at the same time, let these boys hash it out.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to say, hey, we're not doing this on the racetrack, because if you guys wreck yourselves, you're liable to wreck and hurt somebody else that's not even involved in the incident.
Right.
When they get out of the race cars, let those guys at it. Let them be.
I want to elaborate on the names that you brought up, because it's important to know the difference in today's racers and yesterday's racers, right? And when I say yesterday, I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very big difference in racers. Like, it's such a huge gap in such a short amount of time. You mentioned Denny, you mentioned Martin Truex Jr., you mentioned Kyle Busch, and there was another one you mentioned that retired, Kevin Harvick. You listed
And Ryan Newman.
And Ryan Newman. You listed all the older fellows of yesteryear, right? And what it sounds like is a you problem. Like, if that's, I understand the difference of opinion of, this is how we used to race, this is how it used to be, I don't like it anymore. I completely understand that viewpoint, but it's 2024, and some of these guys don't race the way y'all raced in 2005. I'm sorry that's the way it is for y'all, but they're doing just fine. Kyle Larson's winning championships. Chase Elliott's winning championships. Even a couple of the mid-range guys, you're not mid-range.
Well, seeing the names that you just, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the names you just listed are guys that are racing the rest of the field with respect.
Right.
Now, we got on the issue, Ty Gibbs, he's grown up a lot, but when Ty came into the sport, Ty was a perfect example of that. Coming into the sport, and just because he got pissed off, he was going to turn that wheel left or right and didn't care who the hell he took out.
Right. We see.
Look at the incident with Denny Hamlin on pit road. That could have seriously injured or killed somebody.
Right.
So that all those guys.
He was reckless, is what the problem was.
But I'm not saying he's reckless, and he's not dangerous by any means.
He wasn't
and Ty,
dangerous, but he was reckless.
And Ty has grown up. He's matured a lot. But we still have some of these guys that just get pissed off, and instead of waiting to get out of the car, like Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott a couple years ago at Bristol. Do you remember that whole ordeal?
Right.
Okay, they hashed out words out on pit road. Let the fans see it. But these new guys are coming in and costing innocent racers their day because they're wanting to hook people or wreck them or do whatever. And there's these two guys that are involved. Imagine if Reddick and Buescher, the way that they did, what if they'd have collected Larson or somebody else that was nowhere near involved? I mean, that's what I'm talking about, the disrespect to the garage. Right. They have no concern for anybody else but themselves and whoever pissed them off. Now, I'm not saying, that's, to me, if they're not pissed off of something like that, then they're not passionate about what they're doing.
Right.
And that, to me, that's all that anger, that's all that is just extreme passion for what they do.
Unless you've actually been in a racing situation and have felt the adrenaline of handling a machine at those speeds with that amount of control around very, very large amounts of other racers around you, you will never understand the amount of adrenaline and it's almost like a blackout, other than the actual
It's
road
it's almost like having anxiety without having anxiety.
it's such a trip, man. And I haven't raced at crazy speeds, but I've been in racing before, and you just there's no way to describe what a driver is feeling in such a passionate moment. So to us racers and race fans that know those feelings and why drivers react the way they do on track, it completely 100% makes sense why we've seen guys wreck each other. And now that it's happening more and more, I think it's a testament to how much is on the line for these guys each and every single week. And when somebody ruins their day, they're just like, I'm gonna fucking ruin your day too. And that's just what it is.
And see where the testament to those guys out on the racetrack, but what about the testament to the guys that put those race cars out on the racetrack, the money that they're spending? At some point, there's got to be some give and take. You know, whether it's respect or saying, okay, you know what, we'll deal with this on pit road after the race.
Right.
Instead of, you know, because these race cars, especially these new next gen cars, they're not cheap.
Right.
And then you have these teams like Hendrick and Penske and JGR that are running 4 cars. So what happens, you know, when you're Denny Hamlin and you wreck somebody and you're taking out a teammate? Like, I know that Monday morning meeting is going to be really fucking awkward, but at some point the owners have to get fed up with it, because I'm sure they're getting sick and tired of emptying their pockets because of these guys just wanting to wreck race cars out of pure anger.
And let's be fair, we're not seeing an epidemic of wrecked
race cars, yeah,
of violence, or not violence. I'm looking for the correct word. Payback being shown by drivers.
Receipts.
It's still a pretty rare thing if we're being 100% honest. Like, I would say we haven't really seen a payback wreck this year, have we? Like,
not that I can recall, but I know because
what I mean?
of what was going on last season, especially with the veteran drivers,
right.
that there was a lot of talk. I can't remember. Maybe it was Ross. It was somebody with Blaney. And, of course, I know I'm going to throw Blaney out there and him crying and whining about a bunch of stuff. But then again, there it is. It's the passion.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
He cares.
So, yeah. So, I mean, when you're doing good and you're running your own race and somebody just comes up and doors you or slams you in the wall, and so, of course, if it's me, I'm going to be absolutely pissed off.
Right.
As a racer, to me, I'd like to have the respect towards, you know, I'm pissed off at that driver, but I also have to think there's an owner that's putting that car out there on the racetrack, that if I wreck them, and there may be one of these small teams, you know, like Joey Gase Racing with the incident in Richmond a couple weeks ago and all that stuff. Those guys pay for that stuff out of their own pocket.
Right.
So I feel like that's where the detriment comes in, is when with these guys that are, they don't care who they wreck or what's being done. But like you said, I know we haven't had a whole lot of those. I feel like more of them have been through the Truck and Xfinity series more than the Cup series.
Right.
But you guys have all these Cup guys going down to the lower levels, and you have all these Truck and Xfinity guys coming up to the Cup level to fill in, like Corey Heim a couple weeks ago for Eric Jones, Carson Hocevar last year filling in at Spire for Noah Gragson and all that stuff. So it all intertwines at some point, but I feel like it all comes down to having respect for each other in the garage. And I feel like the last probably 10 years, the respect in the garage has dwindled a lot.
What would we say qualifies as respect in the garage? Because I'm not a driver, and so I don't see the camaraderie in behind when they're talking amongst themselves, or they're in each other's motorhomes, or they're talking between practices and qualifying. So I don't really know how not respectful it is in the garage, right? Like, I know we've heard a couple of the older racers talk about how there's no respect in the garage.
I feel like Chris Buescher made it not abundantly clear, but a good example when he walked over to Reddick this past weekend and he said, "You wrecked me. I've done nothing but raced you clean."
Right.
I feel like in that instant, Chris Buescher felt disrespected, because he's done nothing but, race him clean, and then he gets wrecked.
And that's a great example you bring up, because Chris went in there hot and he went in there heavy. Like, why the F would you race me so hard and wreck both of us? That's kind of why. That's kind of he was seeing red, and he was just like, why would you do that? And when Tyler was like, bro, like, my bad. I had a completely different, my plan went completely different in my head and it didn't work out. I'm sorry. And then we saw Chris be the mature person he is, that we've seen him be on a lot of occasions, realize,
Oh yeah.
I think he realized who he was talking to, and it kind of like you could see it physically. Chris kind of calmed back down. He was still hot, don't get me wrong, and he had a right to be. But when he realized who he was talking to, and he was like, "I've never raced you like that,"
and the response that he got too, I don't feel like Chris was expecting the response that he got from Reddick. I feel like that's why he went from here down to here real fucking quick.
Right.
And it wasn't because, I'm going to get my ass whooped or whatever, but the disrespect that he felt, he was pissed. And then when Tyler was like, look, bro, like that's my fault. I fucked up. And Chris was like, okay, well, it wasn't out of disrespect. It was just a racing incident. Now it's still okay for him to be pissed off, because he's got every right to be.
Absolutely.
But now that he's been shown the respect that he thought he was owed because he raced him so clean, that I feel like that incident's probably going to be in the past.
I think so.
I don't feel like Chris is going to be hold that grudge, or in the playoffs and say, you know what, you wrecked me. This is the only way I'm going to get this win this week. And I don't feel like Chris Buescher's that. And then we go back to the Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell incident at COTA. Right. When Kyle came over and was like, look, you've wrecked me 3 different times, twice today. You've wrecked me 3 different times this season. He was like, have I ever wrecked you?
I know one of those was Kyle's fault. The turn 1 incident, Kyle put his, I still think that was Kyle's fault. Chris put his nose in there because it was available, and Kyle came across his nose. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. And and I feel like that'd been a little bit of Kyle Busch's fault. And I feel like it's a 50-50 fault on that motion. The only reason I say that is because, yes, Kyle did come in wide, but Christopher came in hot as hell.
Right.
He even locked up that left front before he hit Kyle. So I feel like Christopher felt like that gap was open enough that he could probably make the pass. And then when he seen Kyle turn down as deep as he did, he realized, oh shit, I fucked up.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like it was a 50-50 spot. But the other point in Christopher just door banging him and spinning him out, like there was no call for that. And I feel like that's where Kyle was coming from. And I feel like Kyle has gotten fed up with the disrespect, because when he told Christopher, he's like, if I ever wrecked you, and Christopher was like, no. And he was like, okay, good. His payback's fucking coming.
I want to use this analogy because I'm a huge basketball fan. I watch a lot of basketball. And LeBron James is a good example of a champion that feels disrespected at times. And I think we can compare Kyle Busch to him because they're both champions at their profession. And I feel like a bunch of younger NBA players are coming into the league these days. And I'm using this to mirror NASCAR. NASCAR's got a lot of young guns coming in, and they're good, man. These guys can race.
Oh, yeah.
And just like with the NBA, these dudes can hoop. I don't know if y'all have heard of Anthony Edwards. This kid is tearing up the league, and it's pretty fun to watch. And he's 22. And these guys are going at LeBron James. LeBron James, right? The king, LeBron. They're going at him, and they don't care. I'm not high-fiving you before and after the game. You're in my way of my goals and what I'm trying to do. And I think that's what a lot of these guys coming into the Cup Series and Xfinity Series these days. I don't care about your record. I don't care how many trophies you got. I want to win.
They're trying to make a name for themselves.
Bingo.
And they're pushing their way to the top, and
it's hard for me to be against that when we've seen drivers from the 80s and 90s kind of have the same mentality. They're coming in, they're like, hey, I'm
Tim Richmond.
I'm just saying, it's no different than 30 years ago. And I think the older guys are just feeling the heat because they're not as successful as they once were. And these young guns are being pretty darn successful. I just try and see everything from both sides. I think some of the older guys are frustrated because they know their end is getting close. We didn't see Jimmy Johnson really get frustrated a lot with some of the newer drivers as he was on his very rapid decline. Jimmy Johnson handled his exit very well.
And I feel like, but Jimmy didn't have a lot of Jimmy's problems when he would wreck out were not caused by anybody else. It was a Jimmy Johnson incident. Now, like I said, the incident with Christopher Bell, do I feel like Kyle or Christopher was completely 110% at fault? No, and this is coming from a Kyle Busch fan.
Right.
Like I just explained to myself, that one hit, that's a 50-50. Kyle took the turn wide. I know he had a tight race car, so I understand why the wide turn, and Christopher just misjudged it. Granted, he still hit Kyle, still spun out, so there's still fault there.
Right.
But to me, that's a racing incident, but at the same time, I see why that pisses Kyle off, because not even just 10 laps prior, Christopher was the one who hit him and spun him, prior. So Kyle lets it go, first time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me.
Right.
But I feel like that's why Kyle Busch was so heated after that, is because, okay, I gave you the one, that was a mistake, racing incident. But the second time, granted, it was half of Kyle's fault.
Right.
But if Christopher,
on top of what has happened, so it's already a twofold.
Exactly.
Would it be too far-fetched to think that Kyle Busch had some animosity and it just happened to be Christopher Bell in a JGR car that did it to him, and so it kind of ramped him up a little bit more on his response? Because had it been a Chevy or someone else, maybe he doesn't react that way. And even Christopher Bell doesn't have a lot of enemies on the racetrack, so the response itself was kind of surprising for me. And then I put two and two together. Well, he's a JGR car, so.
Well, and I feel like maybe Kyle felt that way towards Christopher, not just because it's a JGR car, but Christopher Bell owes Kyle Busch his career.
Right.
Without Kyle Busch, there's no Christopher Bell.
But look at it from Christopher Bell's perspective. Christopher Bell is now on this side of it.
Yep.
He was given those opportunities, and now he's trying to be successful with those opportunities.
And I do agree with that. But I feel like Kyle, the whole reason he was pissed off, not just because of what happened, but because of everything he's done for Christopher as far as the mentoring and all that stuff. And I feel like Kyle felt like maybe the disrespect was just a little deeper.
Okay.
Just because of who it came from and what kind of history those guys had.
Right.
Not just as a boss, but as a mentor to a younger driver who drove for Kyle, drove the wheels off that Ford truck, won a truck championship, raced with Kyle at Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series, it was a teammate. So did it have a lot being a JGR car? I agree with you. I feel like had some sort of portion to it.
Right.
But the history, the connection, the history that Chris and Kyle have, I feel that's why Kyle was ultimately as pissed off as he was, because he felt like he was owed a little more than what Christopher allowed.
Gotcha.
And now Christopher, I'm sure he learned from that mistake. We haven't seen it at all. Christopher is normally one of the cleanest drivers, unless of course you're in his way.
Yeah,
but Christopher is also one of the
on the front of his car at certain times.
But the difference between Christopher and a lot of these other aggressive drivers, Christopher is aggressive when he needs to be. But I feel like the difference is that Christopher is respectably aggressive.
Right.
Unlike Logano, and no shot at you, but Ross Chastain, those guys where they're like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to run into the side of you, or I'm going to put the bumper to you, and whatever happens, fucking happens.
Right.
And I feel like there's some drivers that drive out there like that, and then you have drivers like Christopher Bell who are aggressive, but they try to be as respectful as they can while they're trying to be aggressive. Joey Logano is another one of those guys, but he's been on the opposite end of that. We saw that in 2015 with him and Matt Kenseth.
Right.
Joey Logano, absolutely aggressive. 0.2 of a second faster than Kenseth that race. But in retrospect, does Kenseth have a reason to be pissed off because he threw the block?
Right.
So it all boils down to that. But the aggressiveness level, I feel like here recently with these drivers, they're being too aggressive too early in the race. And I feel that's why we're getting so many tempers and so many emotions. Because if it's 20 to go or 15 to go and somebody gets aggressive and somebody wrecks out, big fucking deal. But if it's lap 20 and somebody's getting wrecked because somebody's being too aggressive, to me, that's calling the kettle black a little bit. So,
and then there's got to be a point, and I'm going to have to cut us off here after we finish up this one, but it comes to a point where NASCAR's like, well, do we let the guys have at it or do we police this? Because if we police it, then are they actually racing for real? And I think you might lose some of what NASCAR is. Whereas if they let whoever is going to have that mentality over it, we'll handle the penalties and stuff on the back end of it, but let them handle this themselves.
And I feel like NASCAR needs to let them handle themselves, because I feel like if they police it way too much, one, I don't know how many fans that I see pissed off.
Right.
And I'm not pissed off, but I'm aggravated a little bit because I'm like, NASCAR is changing.
Right.
I'm up for a lot of the changes. I'm still skeptical about some of the five race tournament and the all-star race and like the conversations we've had. I'm still a little skeptical. If it works great. And I'm all for it,
right.
But let these guys hash it out. And if it comes down to, innocent drivers getting caught up in other people's shit and stuff like that, and points, driver points, ownership points, penalties, things like that aren't doing it, then NASCAR definitely needs to step in. But other than that, I feel like NASCAR needs to take a step back and let the drivers handle their own.
Yeah. Let them.
And I feel like if NASCAR doesn't police it, the passion these drivers have, I feel like we see it out on the track and in the racing if NASCAR will just leave it alone. If not, these drivers are going to tiptoe around each other because they're going to be afraid to get ownership points taken, driver's points, having to pay a fine, get suspended. So, but yeah, we're going to leave it on that. We'll let the viewers think on that, and we will be back tomorrow. Don, you go enjoy some Mexican food, buddy, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to enjoy a little bit of
there you go
myself. You have a good evening, buddy.
You too.
Everybody, this is Motor Racing Podcast. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Y'all be safe.